Why does it feel like every time you try to change, something pulls you right back? You start strong. You cut the excuses. You finally show up. And for a moment, it feels like you've turned a corner. But then it hits you. Not all at once. Silently. Subtly. A voice in your head says, "Just skip today." A notification distracts you before you even breathe. A person from your past shows up with the same old energy. And you shrink, just enough to feel it. And just like that, you're not who you were becoming anymore. You're who you used to be again. That's what most people never talk about. Change doesn't fail because you didn't try hard enough. It fails because you didn't protect it. You started to become someone stronger. But you were still surrounded by triggers, habits, voices, and routines, designed to keep the old you alive. You changed your mindset. But your environment still speaks the language of your past. So let's get real. If you don't create a system that defends your new self, the world will slowly convince you to destroy it. Not out of hate, out of comfort, out of familiarity, out of the soft, invisible pressure to fit back into a life that doesn't challenge anyone. But you didn't come this far to be accepted. You came to become unstoppable. This video is not for people who want motivation. It's for people who are done slipping back. You'll learn how to detect the silent traps that pull you into old behaviors. Remove anything in your environment that tempts your weak self. Reinforce the mindset of who you're becoming until it becomes unshakable. And rebuild your days to support your new standard without needing external approval. We're not here to make another change. We're here to protect it, to anchor it, to build a system so solid, the old you can't survive in it anymore. Because here's the truth. You don't lose momentum by accident. You lose it when you don't defend the version of yourself that earned it. And today that ends. If you've ever wondered why staying changed feels harder than starting, you're about to find out. And by the end of this video, you won't just feel strong again. You'll know exactly how to stay that way. Let's begin. You've made a decision to change. But let's be honest, change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens while you're still living in the same environment, surrounded by the same triggers, and being pulled by the same invisible forces that built the old you. And if you don't learn to spot those forces, you'll mistake resistance for failure. You'll think you're slipping because you're weak, when in reality, you're just surrounded by things that keep feeding your past. The first threat to your new identity isn't failure. It's familiarity. That same couch where you wasted hours. That same app that stole your mornings. That same friend who always says, "You're working too hard, just chill." The world hasn't changed just because you did. And if you don't confront that, it will consume you. Let's break it down. You're waking up earlier now. You're trying to be more focused. You've started showing up in ways you never have before. But your phone still owns the first 10 minutes of your day. Your space is still cluttered. You still open conversations that drain you. You still follow people who remind you of who you were, not who you're becoming. And you wonder why it feels like walking through mud every day. It's not you. It's what's around you. You see, the old version of you didn't just live in your habits. It lived in your surroundings, in the default settings of your life. And here's the trap. You started changing the way you move, but you left the old system intact. Same music, same desk, same tabs open, same tone in your self-talk. You didn't rebuild the room. You just brought a new mindset into an old prison. No wonder it's suffocating. And the worst part? It doesn't feel like sabotage. It feels like home. That's how the enemy hides in comfort. It's the playlist that relaxes you, but also makes you nostalgic for who you used to be. It's the show you rewatch because it's background noise, but it keeps you sitting for hours instead of building. It's the conversations that feel light, but keep you tied to people who aren't growing. And every day, these things quietly pull you back into alignment with the identity you swore you were done with. So let's name the problem clearly. Your environment was built for the old you, and you're trying to survive in it with a new standard. That's not sustainable. If you don't edit your world, you will relapse, not because you're broken, but because the system you're living in is designed for your failure. So here's the work. You don't just change your habits. You rebuild your space, clean the desk, delete the apps, Change your lock screen to something that reminds you who you are now. Move the furniture if you have to. Wake up earlier and make sure the first thing you see speaks the language of your new identity. Your external world must reflect your internal shift. And it doesn't stop at objects. It includes people. This part hurts, but it's real. Some people in your life are tied to the version of you that played small. They don't mean harm, but they don't challenge you. They don't understand what you're building. And they'll unintentionally hold you back because your growth makes them question their comfort. You don't have to cut everyone off, but you do need boundaries. You need to stop explaining your standards. Stop seeking permission to evolve. Stop checking in with people who still measure your worth by your past. Because if you're not intentional, you'll spend your energy trying to stay loyal to relationships that reward your weakness. This is the first real defense of your new self. Audit your world. Relentlessly. Everything you see, everything you hear, everything you allow into your first hour of the day. It's either reinforcing who you're becoming or inviting back who you used to be. And you're not just editing for aesthetics. You're editing for identity. Because what surrounds you repeats you. And if you want to live at a new level, you can't wake up inside the world that kept you average. So ask yourself now, what have I normalized that doesn't match who I'm becoming? What voices, visuals, objects, and patterns are still speaking to my old self? What am I tolerating in my environment that I'd never accept in my mindset? That's the first layer of protection. Not just discipline, but alignment. You already made the decision to change. Now it's time to make sure your world gets the message too. Don't let comfort decorate the prison you just escaped from. Tear it down. Rebuild. Create an environment that holds your standard, even when your energy dips. Because eventually it will. Motivation fades. Feelings shift. But if your space is set up to protect who you've become, you'll rise, even when you don't feel like it. That's real power. Let's keep going. Most people don't relapse with a bang. They slip back quietly, through conversations they think are harmless. With themselves. You've had those moments. You've done enough for today. You'll be more focused tomorrow. Just one break. You deserve it. Let's not be too extreme. It doesn't sound like sabotage. It sounds like balance. Like logic. Like maturity. But it's not. It's negotiation. And it's lethal. Because the enemy doesn't always yell. Sometimes, it whispers through your thoughts using your own voice. Dressed in empathy, wrapped in logic, and timed perfectly for your weakest moment. That's how the old you fights to survive. It doesn't argue directly. It suggests. It nudges. It creates just enough doubt for you to delay action. And if you don't catch it, you won't even realize what happened until the momentum is gone again. You'll think you're tired. You'll think you're being flexible. You'll think you're being kind to yourself. But what you're really doing is bargaining with the version of you that should have been buried. Let's get specific. You make a commitment. I'm going to train today. But then that internal voice says, it's already late. Your body needs rest. It's better to be fresh tomorrow. So you skip it. And you feel a little guilty, but mostly relieved. Because you didn't fail. You just made a reasonable decision. But here's the truth you need to see clearly. Reasonable doesn't always mean right. Sometimes, it just means familiar. And the familiar parts of you, the parts that crave ease, comfort, approval, they will always sound the most convincing when you're trying to rise. They know your language. They know your fears. They know exactly which phrases calm your urgency just long enough to stop your growth. This is why most people don't keep the changes they make. Not because they lack discipline, but because they don't recognize the tone of internal betrayal. They confuse it with self-care. They call it wisdom. They say they're listening to their body, but what they're really doing is following the familiar path back to mediocrity. One excuse that feels true at a time. So let's make this practical. You need to identify the voice of the negotiator inside you, not to hate it, but to disarm it. Because the moment you can hear it clearly, you take back the power to reject it. Here's how it usually shows up. It appeals to your exhaustion. You've been so good lately. Take today off. It appeals to your past. You've never been consistent. What's one more time? It appeals to your future. You'll go even harder tomorrow. Just rest today. It appeals to fairness. Nobody else is this extreme. Don't burn out. But listen closely. All of those lines are written by your old self, not your highest self, not your focused self, not the one that made the decision to transform. They come from the part of you that wants relief more than results. And that's the voice you must confront. Because until you can hear the tone of weakness disguised as reason, you'll keep letting it run your schedule, your habits, your momentum. So here's the challenge. The next time that voice shows up, don't argue, don't explain, don't rationalize. Just say this. That sounds familiar. And familiar is not who I'm becoming. This is the new rule. If the thought makes you smaller, it's not truth. It's resistance. You're not going to feel ready every day. You're not going to want it every hour. And that's not a flaw. That's reality. But you're not here to be led by feelings. You're here to be led by standards. You're done making decisions based on mood. You're done giving weight to thoughts that have proven over and over. They don't serve you. This is the next layer of defense. Clarity over comfort. Action over agreement. Forward over familiar. You don't argue with old thinking. You replace it. You drown it in proof. You show up, not because you feel like it, but because that's who you've become. That's how you win. Not through motivation, through refusal, through repetition, through an identity that's no longer up for debate. So ask yourself now, what phrases always show up when I'm close to breaking through? What logic do I use to justify delay, softness, or retreat? What decisions do I call reasonable, even when they leave me with regret? That's your script. That's the language of your negotiator. And now that you've named it, you can delete it. Your new self doesn't bargain with what it's already decided. Let's move forward. Let's be honest. Motivation is unreliable. Some days, you wake up sharp. Other days, you feel like a ghost in your own life. No clarity, no drive, no energy. And yet, your identity depends on what you do in those exact moments. Not on the days when it's easy, but on the ones when everything in you wants to disappear. That's where most people collapse. Not because they don't want it enough, but because they built their discipline on emotion. They only act when they feel like it. They only show up when it's convenient. They only keep their word when it's comfortable. And that version of discipline? It doesn't survive pressure. It doesn't survive real life. Because real life doesn't care about your goals. It throws chaos at you. Interruptions, setbacks, delays. And if you don't have a system that keeps you anchored when those storms hit, you go right back to who you used to be. The version of you that always starts strong and fades. So here's the shift. You don't need more motivation. You need a system that works even when you don't. A structure that moves forward even if you're dragging behind it. Not based on mood, based on rhythm. Let me explain. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wait to feel inspired. You just do it. Why? Because it's automatic. It's integrated. It's part of how you move. Now imagine if your habits that actually change your life. Your deep work, your workouts, your planning, your journaling, your reading. We're treated with that same inevitability. That's what we're building now. A daily rhythm that doesn't care how you feel. Here's the truth. Discipline is not about being perfect. It's about building routines that protect you from yourself. So let's break it down. You need a minimum viable structure, something you commit to every single day. No matter how tired, late, overwhelmed, or distracted you feel. Something so embedded in your identity that skipping it feels wrong. Not because someone's watching, but because it would violate who you've decided to become. It might be 10 minutes of movement, a cold shower before any screen, a handwritten page in your journal, your non-negotiable power block of deep work, a system shut off at night so you protect your sleep. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it's yours. Something that reinforces every single day. I don't need to feel like it to follow through. Because the version of you that survives pressure is not the one who works hardest when inspired. It's the one who acts without needing inspiration at all. Let's make it even more practical. Most people build their days around preferences. You need to build your day around priorities. Stop asking, What do I feel like doing right now? Start asking, what is the strongest version of me never skip? Then design around that. Build triggers into your day. If I wake up, I hydrate and move before any input. If I open my laptop, I touch my project before checking email. If I feel resistance, I lean in harder, because resistance is the sign. This removes thinking. It removes debate. It removes delay. The system protects you from the negotiation. The rhythm protects you from inconsistency. And it does more than that. It sends a message to your subconscious. This is who I am now. I don't need adrenaline to act. My life runs on decision, not impulse. And when you stack those days, something shifts. Not just in your calendar, but in your confidence. Because confidence doesn't come from hype. It comes from evidence. You start to trust yourself again. You start to expect follow-through, not hope for it. You stop wondering if you'll break, and start knowing that you won't. And here's something people don't say out loud. Your system is more honest than your words. You can say you're focused. You can say you're disciplined. You can say you're serious. But if your environment, your calendar, your inputs, your nights, your mornings, if none of it reflects that, then it's just a mood, not a decision. So ask yourself, what is the bare minimum version of my new self that I can lock in daily? What do I keep skipping that the strongest me would never excuse? What friction exists in my environment that breaks my rhythm? Answer those, and then build your system accordingly. No more scattered actions. No more waking up hoping to feel ready. No more plans without protection. This is identity maintenance, and it starts with structure. From now on, the goal isn't to be consistent when life allows it. It's to be consistent no matter what life throws at you. You've done the mindset work. Now it's time to build the mechanism that makes it last. Let's keep going. You're changing. You're doing the work. And maybe for the first time in your life, you're actually following through. But now, something strange is happening. The people closest to you aren't cheering. They're questioning. They're uncomfortable. And some are even pulling away. You thought they'd be proud. You thought they'd understand. You thought they'd feel inspired. But instead, they missed the old you. The version who stayed small, agreeable, accessible, predictable. Why? Because when you start evolving, you become a mirror. And not everyone is ready to see their reflection. Your progress exposes their stagnation. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your discipline exposes their excuses. And most people don't react to that with admiration. They react with resistance. They say things like, "You've changed. You're obsessed. Don't take things so seriously. You need to live a little." But what they really mean is, "I don't recognize you anymore, and that makes me uncomfortable. Your new standards make me feel guilty about mine. I miss the version of you who didn't challenge my laziness." This is one of the most brutal parts of transformation. You lose people who loved your past more than your potential. Not because they're bad, but because they were only ever aligned with your weaker self. And when that version dies, so do some relationships. You're no longer available for the same conversations. You don't show up to the same distractions. You don't tolerate the same mediocrity. And when you remove those patterns, you remove the common ground that kept certain people close. So here's what you need to understand. Every time you raise your standard, you force others to either rise with you or fall away. And you must be okay with both. You are not responsible for making your evolution comfortable for anyone. You are not obligated to explain your hunger. You are not required to tone down your progress to protect someone else's ego. Because if you keep doing that, if you keep dimming your light just to be liked, you'll eventually resent the people you once felt loyal to. Let's get real. Some people only supported you when your dreams were small enough not to threaten them. Now that you're serious, now that you're disciplined, now that you've stopped apologizing for your ambition, they feel the distance. Let them, because this part of the journey, it's not about being understood. It's about being honest. Honest about who you are. Honest about what you need. Honest about what no longer fits in your life. That includes conversations, routines, group chats, relationships, anything that tempts the old you back into power. You don't hate these people, but you no longer sacrifice your growth to keep them close. This is the moment where you build emotional boundaries as tight as your habits. Because what's the point of doing all this internal work if you keep letting the external world undo it? You've said no to the old mindset. Now it's time to say no to the voices that keep it alive. So here's what that looks like. You stop explaining your routine to people who don't value it. You stop waiting for support from those who never gave it. You stop showing up in places that reward your past but punish your progress. And when the guilt shows up, because it will, you remind yourself, you're not abandoning anyone. You're just refusing to abandon yourself again. Let that be enough. Because the real ones, they'll adjust. They'll rise. They'll respect the boundaries. They'll support your new pace, even if they don't fully get it yet. But the ones who only loved your weakness, they'll try to negotiate with your strength. And your job isn't a debate. Your job is to keep moving. Because the version of you who gave everyone access, who kept the peace at the cost of your purpose, who stayed quiet so others could stay comfortable, that version isn't running your life anymore. Now, you protect your new self the same way you protect your time. With intention, with clarity, with zero apologies. So ask yourself now, who in my life still treats me like the old me? What relationships reward my inconsistency more than my discipline? Where am I shrinking not because I believe in it, but because I don't want to make someone else uncomfortable? Those are the pressure points. And if you don't address them, they'll pull you back. Not all at once, but through subtle suggestions, through familiar energy, through the magnetic pull of who you used to be. Don't let it happen. You don't owe access to anyone who doesn't respect who you're becoming. This step is about emotional separation from anything that keeps you tied to the old self. Not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Because if you're serious about protecting the new you can't keep building while reaching back at the same time. Let go, so you can go. Let's keep moving. You've made so much progress. You're thinking differently. You're acting with more intention. You've cut the noise. You've lost the old patterns. You've even lost some people. And now, out of nowhere, you feel it. The ache, the pull, the strange, quiet desire to go back. Not because you want to give up, but because you miss it. You miss the comfort. You miss the ease. You miss the version of yourself who didn't feel this much pressure. And for a second, you wonder, was I actually happier before? Is this even worth it? What if I'm just trying too hard? That moment, that fragile space between who you were and who you're becoming, is where most people break. Not from failure, from grief. Because growth feels like loss. You're losing your old rhythm, your old identity, your old sense of certainty. Even if it was based on avoidance and delay, it was yours. And now it's gone. That's hard to explain to people. It's hard to admit. Because you think that if you miss the past, maybe you weren't meant to leave it. But you were. Missing something doesn't mean you should return to it. It just means you're feeling the withdrawal of familiarity. Let that be okay. Because transformation isn't just about building new habits. It's about letting the old ones die, without trying to save them every time they scream. And some days, they scream loud. Especially when you're tired. Especially when you're alone. Especially when no one sees the work you're doing and you wonder if it even matters. It does. But right now it hurts. Not because you're wrong, but because you're awake. You're feeling what most people avoid their whole lives. The raw discomfort of real change. Of walking away from something that no longer fits before the new you fully arrives. That space between used to be and not yet is brutal. And most people rush to fill it. With distractions, with validation, with relapse. They run back to what's easy. Not because they want it, but because they know it. But you're not running. You're standing in it. You're letting it burn. You're feeling the stretch, and you're not negotiating with it. That's rare. That's powerful. And that's exactly what builds resilience. Because this isn't just physical discipline anymore. It's emotional discipline. The discipline to not glorify a life that made you feel empty. The discipline to not confuse comfortable with healthy. The discipline to feel lonely and not run back to the crowd you outgrew. So let's say it clearly. You don't miss being the old you. You miss how easy it was to hide inside that version. But ease without alignment isn't peace. It's stagnation. You weren't free back then. You were just familiar with your limits. So yes, this hurts. Yes, it feels lonely. Yes, it's uncomfortable to admit that you miss parts of a life you chose to leave. But don't turn that discomfort into a reason to go back. Let it become a reason to go deeper. Because once you cross this bridge, the one where you finally learn how to keep moving even while grieving who you used to be, you stop being fragile. You stop needing outside approval. You stop needing permission to rise. You stop negotiating with the past. And you start becoming someone unshakable. Here's how you do it. First, acknowledge the feeling. Don't suppress it. Don't judge it. Say it out loud. I miss who I used to be, but I'm not going back. Second, get clear on what you actually miss. Because chances are, you don't miss the procrastination. You don't miss the shame. You don't miss the regret. You don't miss the chaos. You miss the freedom from pressure. You miss the absence of responsibility. You miss the illusion of safety that came from expecting nothing more from yourself. But you're not that person anymore. And pretending you can live in the present while holding on to the past is exactly how you stay stuck in between. You're not in between anymore. You've crossed over. You've changed your language. You've changed your rituals. You've changed your relationships. You've changed the way you make decisions. Now it's time to change the way you see what you've left behind. Stop missing your old life like it was stolen. It wasn't. You outgrew it. And when something no longer fits, you don't mourn it forever. You thank it. And you move on. So ask yourself now, what part of me am I still grieving, even though I know I've outgrown it? Where am I confusing nostalgia with alignment? What needs to be released emotionally, not because it was all bad, but because it's no longer who I am? This is how you make the break final. Not just in action, but in heart. You're not who you used to be. And the cost of becoming who you're meant to be is finally letting go of the parts that felt easy, but kept you invisible. Let's keep going. You've done the hard part. You've walked away. You've let go. You've stopped negotiating. But now comes the part most people underestimate. Reinforcement. Daily. Deliberate. Unseen. Because here's the truth. The old you isn't gone. It's just starving. It's waiting. It's watching. For a moment of weakness. For one skipped promise. For one familiar excuse. And if you're not intentional, if you don't anchor this new identity with evidence, the old self will crawl back in, wearing your confidence like a mask. This is the moment where you prove who you are. Not through vision boards. Not through self-talk. But through repetition. Repetition that overrides your defaults. Repetition that kills hesitation. Repetition that turns discipline from something you practice into something you are. Let's be very clear. You don't become unshakable by feeling different. You become unshakable by proving it. And not once, not loudly, but every single day when no one's clapping and no one's watching and no one cares but you. Because most people wait for proof to come from the outside, from results, from recognition, from applause. But if you need validation to stay committed, you're still not free. You're just performing. So what's the answer? You create internal evidence so strong that even your old self can't argue with it. Let's break this down. The strongest version of you? It's not motivated. It's not hyped. It's not even passionate all the time. It's consistent. Because consistency is the great separator. It's what turns effort into identity. It's what turns intention into transformation. It's what turns goals into standards. So the question is, what are you doing daily that proves who you say you are? Not weekly. Not when it's convenient. Daily. Are you moving when your mind says rest? Are you finishing when the world says stop? Are you honoring your word when no one would notice if you didn't? Because that's the real test. Not how loud you are when you feel strong, but how silent you stay when excuses start whispering again. And you act anyway. That's proof. And here's why it matters. Your brain doesn't trust your goals. It trusts your patterns. So if your days are still inconsistent, if your execution still depends on how you feel, your brain doesn't believe you've changed. No matter how powerful your intentions are. But when you start stacking actions that align with the new you, something shifts internally. You stop needing to convince yourself. You stop needing to explain it. You just know. Because the evidence is there. In your habits. In your patterns. In the way you carry yourself when no one's applauding. That's when the new identity locks in. Not when you hit the goal, but when the process becomes your rhythm. In the old you stops being an option. You start asking better questions. Did I keep my word today? Did I train the muscle of follow-through? Did I create proof that my standard is real, even when no one asked me to? And when the answer is yes, even in small things, you start becoming undeniable. Not in theory, in results, in rhythm, in integrity. That's the version of you that doesn't crumble when life punches back. That doesn't spiral after a setback. That doesn't need a perfect morning to dominate the day. Because it's not about perfect. It's about anchored. You become someone who doesn't need to restart. Because they never stopped. Someone who doesn't need a new plan. Because they're already moving. Someone who doesn't explain. Because their life speaks for itself. But let's be honest, this doesn't happen by accident. You have to design it, reinforce it, protect it like it's sacred. Because it is. This version of you, it's been earned. And now, it needs to be cemented. So ask yourself now, what proof did I create today that this is who I am now? What action did I take not for praise, but for personal alignment? What temptation did I overcome by choice, not force? You can't fake this part. You either live it, or you lose it. But if you're willing to show up daily, not with noise, but with proof, you'll build something even stronger than momentum. You'll build certainty. And once you've tasted certainty, the kind that doesn't waver in silence, that doesn't retreat in chaos, that doesn't beg for validation, you become dangerous. Because you're no longer someone trying to improve. You're someone already living the standard. And there's no going back after that. Let's finish this. You've done what most people never do. You didn't just start. You stayed. You didn't just talk about it. You built it. You didn't just want the new identity. You lived it. And now, it's time to do the one thing that ensures this never slips away again. Seal it. Permanently. Because here's the trap that ruins more transformations than failure ever could. Thinking the work is done. It's not. The version of you you've created, it's still young, still fragile, still vulnerable to the same temptations, distractions, and energy that once kept you stuck for years. And if you don't anchor it daily, if you don't create a rhythm that makes it non-negotiable, you'll go back, not by choice, by pattern. Because the old self doesn't need your permission to return. It just needs you to get tired, to loosen your standard, to say, I've done enough, to stop proving it. But you didn't come this far to fade. You came to build something undeniable, something unshakable, something permanent. So let's get honest. This isn't a performance. You're not here to impress anyone. You're not here to document your change or seek applause. You're here to live it. In silence. With integrity, and without relapse, because real change isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It shows up in what you do when no one's watching, in what you tolerate when the world isn't clapping, in what you choose when your energy is gone but your standard still speaks. That's what keeps the new you alive. Not hype, not emotion. Systems, standards, self-respect. You wake up with clarity. You show up without question. You move with precision. You protect your energy like your life depends on it. Because in many ways, it does. And the longer you live like this, the more the old version fades. Not because you killed it in one moment, but because it slowly runs out of space to exist in your world. You're not just different now. You're unavailable for anything that contradicts who you've become. You don't miss your old excuses. You don't respond to familiar distractions. You don't react to old triggers, you outgrow them. Because this isn't about momentum anymore. It's about identity maintenance. And that requires one decision every single day. I protect what I've built, even when it's hard, even when it's quiet, even when no one's validating it. That's how you keep this real. That's how you live in alignment. That's how you become someone who no longer second-guesses who they are. You're not seeking transformation anymore. You are the transformation. You're not watching people who live with discipline. You've become one of them. You're not looking for a new method. You're following the rhythm that already works. because you made it yours. So ask yourself now, what would it look like to protect this identity with the same energy you used to protect your excuses? What needs to be locked in, not as a preference, but as a requirement? Who do I become when I stop looking back completely? This is it. This is the moment you burn the blueprint of who you used to be and build a life where the old version of you simply doesn't fit anymore. Not mentally, not emotionally, not physically. You're not trying to change anymore. You're protecting what you've already changed and refusing to let it slip. No resets, no breakdowns, no starting over. From now on, every action is a statement. I'm not going back. Not this time. Not ever. This is how you become someone the world can't pull off track. Because there's no crack to enter, no doubt to exploit, no space to negotiate. You're sealed, and nothing gets through unless you say so. And if this video didn't just hit your mind up, but hit your identity, if it reminded you of the version you're building, and the one you swore you'd never return to, then protect that fire. Don't let it fade. Because if this was the chapter where the old you died, keep proving that you're no longer available for who you used to be. So, watch the next video now.